Hi there, Year 10. So we're carrying on today with our Inspector Calls revision, and we are going to finish looking at Eva Smith today. Before we do, I have got 5 questions from A Christmas Carol for you, and they all relate to the spirits that visit Scrooge. So pause your screens and have a go at answering these 5 questions. So, the ghost of Christmas past has a jet of light projecting up from its head, and this light symbolises the truth of Scrooge's past. And that's quite a common idea in literature. The light will often represent the truth. It's very much associated with biblical ideas that Jesus is the light of the world, etc. So, yes, he has a jet of light projecting from his head, and this light represents the truth. Remember that in the novella, Scrooge can't stand to see anymore, and he grabs the cap and pushes it down over the ghost of Christmas past's head. He cannot handle the truth. He cannot bear to see anymore. Number 3, the ghost of Christmas present, that big jolly giant that epitomises Christmas spirit. Around his belt hangs an empty scabbard, a sword holder. It's empty and rusty. And what does that symbolise? It symbolises that it's not used, because Christmas is a time to put down your weapons and embrace peace. To not fight, but to offer peace. And that empty scabbard symbolises that at Christmas time we should embrace peace and goodwill. And lastly, the final ghost is very frightening because it embodies man's great fear of the unknown. Obviously, it's the ghost of Christmas yet to come, the future. The future is unknown, and whilst it can be exciting, it can also be very frightening. It's certainly frightening for Scrooge when he witnesses his own death. We know as well that the ghost is faceless. It's hooded. We can't see its face, and it never speaks. It's silent. It merely points with its outstretched arm. And silence is part of the unknown. And faceless, we do not know what the creature looks like, and we fear it might look terrifying. So the final ghost is the most scary of all 3, and it's because it embodies man's great fear of the unknown. Okay, so yesterday we began to look at Eva Smith. Here are some facts that we reminded ourselves of when we were looking at Eva Smith. We remembered that she's from the country. She's a lively, good-looking girl. She commits suicide all alone in her bedsit, and she does that because she's desperate. She has no other choice. She has tried to seek help, and Mrs. Burling is the last person and obviously refuses to help her, so she's desperate. So we looked at Inspector Gould in his exit speech clearly establishes that Eva Smith is an everyman character. Eva Smith represents the fate and the suffering and the lives of millions and millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths. So Eva Smith is pulled apart in this play. There is a chain of events that is set into motion that bring her to desperate suicide. Now, a fact, the Burlings and Gerald Croft, each and every one of them contribute to her downfall and death. They are all responsible for her death. This is one of Priestley's great messages in the play, that we are socially responsible for one another. We are intertwined and linked. Our suffering, our chances of happiness, our hopes and fears are intertwined. We do not live alone. And the Burlings and Gerald Croft have only thought of themselves, and their selfish behaviour pulls apart and destroys Eva Smith. We're today going to look at how each of the 4 Burlings and Gerald Croft all contribute to the downfall and death of Eva Smith. So the inspector tells Eva's story. She does not appear on stage. She is one of the poor. The poor are unseen and unheard. The inspector is her avenging angel who tells her story and acts as her mouthpiece. But if Eva could tell her own story, this is what she might say. And we're going to think about in each case, who is she talking about? So it's a simple recap and reminder for us to think about who is responsible in each of these cases, 1 to 5, for Eva Smith's death. So she's saying, this is what you did to me. Who is she talking about? Number 1. He picked me up in a bar and took me home. He was in that state when a chap turns nasty and wouldn't take no for an answer. We slept together. It happened a few times. I found out I was pregnant with his child. He stole money to help me, but I refused to take it. So who is Eva Smith talking about there? I want you just to pause for a moment and consider, who is she talking about there? Number 2. She came into the shop with her mother. She tried a dress on that didn't suit her. She said I was laughing at her. She went to the manager and said she would stop the family account unless he sacked me there and then. So who is Eva talking about? As we've said, she does not tell her own story, but if she did, this is what she might say about each of the 5 characters. Moving on to number 3, who might she be talking about here? And it's interesting, isn't it, to hear it in her own words, what she might think of each of the characters. Number 3, he picked me up in a bar. He saved me from a fat, horrid old man. He was kind to me. He even let me stay in his friend's apartment. I knew it couldn't last though, and at the end of the summer he gave me some money to last to the end of the year, and he ended the affair. I was devastated. Who's she talking about there? I mean, this incident clearly has affected her. It leaves her devastated at the end. Who is she talking about? And then number 4. I let the girls out on strike. We were only asking for a few shillings more. Our money ran out after the holidays and we had to go back to work. He wouldn't let me return. He sacked me and the other 5 ringleaders. Who's she talking about there? In her own words, whose treatment is she describing? And finally, number 5. I went to her charitable committee as I was desperate. I was pregnant and I didn't want to take any more stolen money. She took against me from the start and refused to help, said it was the father's responsibility to help me. She used her influence with the other women to stop me getting any help. It was the last straw. So interesting, isn't it, to hear it in Eva's words? She doesn't speak in the play, we never see her. The inspector tells her story for her. But if she could speak, if she could tell her own story, who would she be speaking about in each of these 5 cases? So here we've got them. I would imagine that wasn't too difficult to work out. I would encourage you to read them again and really imagine that Eva Smith is speaking at this point in time, because we get a real insight here into how she feels about each of the characters. The thing that always stands out for me is that in the play, after Gerald gives her the money, she goes away for 2 months to the seaside to get over it. She's clearly very much in love with Gerald and is deeply affected by the end of the affair. Perhaps it's the only time for many years where she's received any sort of kindness from anybody. Interesting, isn't it, that Eric steals money from Eva, yet she, even though she's desperate, she has her morals, she has her principles, she refuses to take the money. Interesting. Okay, so really quick consolidate quiz. Quite a short session today. We've got 10 facts, And my question is, who did this to Eva? So you're going to use this as a consolidate quiz today. I want you to tell me the character each statement relates to. Number 1, who sacked her for being a ringleader? Number 2, who was jealous of Eva's prettiness? Number 3, who influenced others to refuse Eva help? Number 4, who forced himself into Eva's lodgings, into her rooms? Number 5, who installed her in his friend's apartment? Number 6, who demanded the manager sack Eva? Number 7, who stole money to try and help her? Number 8, who refused Eva charity? Number 9, who made an example of her to deter others? And number 10, who despite his poor behaviour sees himself as Eva's rescuer? So some really simple, some you have to think about a little bit harder. Who does each statement relate to? This is your consolidate quiz for today. We will put this up on Teams, but also if you just want to send it, email it or photograph it to your teacher, that's absolutely fine too. Okay, thanks for your time.